Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This
Yeah.
time, we're going all the way back to ancient Egypt for a look at the early life of Moses.
A fascinating story full of twists and turns.
It really is. And we're going to be focusing on Exodus chapter 2. So, to set the scene, the Israelites are enslaved in Egypt, and Pharaoh has just decreed that all newborn Hebrew boys must be killed.
Talk about high stakes. This is a story about survival against incredible odds.
Absolutely. So, we have this desperate mother. She hides her baby Moses for 3 months, but eventually, she can't hide him forever.
hmm
So she comes up with this incredibly risky plan.
You really have to admire her courage and ingenuity.
Yeah, she weaves this basket, seals it tight, and places her precious baby inside, and then sets him adrift on the Nile River.
It's a powerful image, isn't it? It's an act of both desperation and faith.
You said it. She's surrendering her child to the whims of fate, hoping that someone will find him and show him mercy.
And that's where this theme of providence, divine intervention, if you will, starts to come into play.
And it's not just anyone who finds him. It's Pharaoh's own daughter coming down to the Nile for a bath.
Oh, the irony. The very person who could order Moses' death ends up becoming his savior.
It's almost too perfect. But it speaks to this unpredictable nature of life and how sometimes, even in the darkest moments, unexpected sources of hope can appear.
You really never know what's around the corner, do you?
Exactly. So Pharaoh's daughter, she finds this baby, and of course she recognizes him as a Hebrew child.
You'd think that would be it for Moses.
Right. But instead, she's moved with compassion.
It's a really interesting contrast. The brutality of Pharaoh's decree versus this well of compassion in his own daughter.
And then takes another amazing turn. Moses' sister, Miriam, she's been watching this whole thing unfold, and she steps forward. She suggests to Pharaoh's daughter that she find a Hebrew woman to nurse the baby.
Talk about quick thinking. Miriam sees an opportunity and she seizes it.
Doesn't she, though?
Yeah.
And it works. Pharaoh's daughter agrees, and guess who gets the job?
No way.
Yeah.
Mother.
The mother. I
Oh.
mean, what are the chances?
It really is like something out of a movie.
I know, right? So not only is Moses spared, but he gets to be raised by his own mother, ensuring that despite his life in the palace,
Yeah.
he retains that connection to his heritage and his people.
And that sets us up for what comes next. Moses grows up in this incredibly complex environment, surrounded by the opulence and power of the Egyptian court, but carrying within him this knowledge of his true identity as a Hebrew.
It's a fascinating setup, and that brings us to the next chapter in Moses' story, where this clash of identities comes to a head in a very dramatic and life-altering way.
And that's where we'll pick up next time.
So we left off with Moses, right? This prince of Egypt, but also a Hebrew by birth.
It's a recipe for inner conflict, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And that conflict comes to a head when Moses sees an Egyptian taskmaster beating a Hebrew slave.
Oh, this is a turning point in the story.
It really is. You can almost feel Moses' anger and his protectiveness towards his people.
The text actually describes him looking around to make sure that no one's watching.
Right. Almost like he knows what he's about to do is wrong, but he can't help himself.
He's driven by this urge to protect the helpless.
And in a moment of impulse, he kills the Egyptian and hides the body.
It's a rash decision. And it highlights this theme of consequences, you know? Even actions with good intentions can have unintended and often tragic outcomes.
And sure enough, the very next day, Moses sees two Hebrews fighting, and he tries to intervene, but one of them turns on him.
Ouch. That's gotta sting.
Right, and basically says, "Who do you think you are? Are you going to kill me like you killed that Egyptian?"
So the secret's out.
And Moses knows he can't stay in Egypt anymore. He has to flee for his life.
He ends up in Midian all alone, stripped of everything he once had.
The complete reversal of fortune.
Yeah.
But while Moses is in exile back in Egypt, the Israelites, they're suffering under Pharaoh's rule. They cry out to God for help.
And that's where we see this theme of divine timing coming into play. God hears their cries. He hasn't forgotten his people.
It's like he's setting the stage for something bigger, something more dramatic.
Exactly. But here's the question. How does this 3,000-year-old story connect to our lives today?
Because it does, right? These ancient stories, they often contain these timeless truths that resonate across centuries.
Oh, absolutely. We see these themes of purpose, justice, compassion, hope, things that are just as relevant in our modern world as they were back then.
So let's break those down, starting with purpose. You know, Moses' life, it was a roller coaster. He experienced incredible highs and devastating lows.
But it's almost like each experience was shaping him for something greater.
So are you saying that our own struggles, even the ones that feel like setbacks, could actually be guiding us towards a larger purpose?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Think about it. How many times have you faced a challenge in your life and felt lost or uncertain, only to discover later that it led you to something even better?
I like that. It encourages us to trust the journey, even when it's difficult. Now, what about this idea of a standing with the oppressed? What does that look like in our modern context?
Well, Moses risked everything to protect his fellow Hebrew. He saw injustice and he took action. It challenges us to consider how we respond to injustice in our own world.
So it's not enough to just be aware of it. We're called to do something, to speak out, to act, to show compassion.
Precisely. And then there's the lesson of thoughtful action. Remember, Moses acted impulsively when he killed that Egyptian. His intentions were good, but it had some pretty devastating consequences.
It's like a cautionary tale, isn't it? Even in the face of injustice, we need to think before we act. We need to consider the potential impact to our choices.
And finally, there's this recurring theme of hope. Even though the Israelites were suffering, they never lost sight of God's promise.
They kept crying out for deliverance, and their pleas were heard.
It's a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of times, there's always reason to believe that change is possible, to keep fighting for what's right, to trust that a brighter future is just around the corner.
It's an encouragement to hold on to that hope, even when things seem hopeless.
Yeah.
We've been talking about all these themes from Moses' early life, but I keep coming back to this image of the Israelites crying out to God and him actually hearing their pleas. Even in their suffering, there's this unwavering faith, right? This belief that they haven't been forgotten.
It's a powerful image of resilience for sure. I mean, they're enduring unimaginable hardship, yet they still cling to this hope of deliverance. And that's where the concept of faith comes in, isn't it? It's not just about believing, it's about holding on to that belief, even when you can't see the way forward, even when things are falling apart all around you.
Yeah, and it makes me think about those times in our own lives when we feel lost or overwhelmed or maybe even hopeless. It's like a reminder that even in those moments, we can choose to hold on to hope, to trust that something bigger than ourselves is at work.
Sometimes that's all we have, right? That tiny flicker of hope. But it's what keeps us going. It gives us the strength to persevere. And we see this in Exodus, right? That perseverance, it often leads to reward. God doesn't abandon his people. He hears their cries and sets in motion this plan for their liberation.
It's like the story saying, look, even when things seem hopeless, there's always a reason to keep believing, a reason to keep fighting for what's right, to trust that a brighter future is possible.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And that brings us back to that final question for our listeners today. What challenges in your life might actually be leading you toward a greater purpose? It's a question worth thinking about, don't you think? Because sometimes the obstacles that we face, the detours, the setbacks, they're actually guiding us towards something amazing, something we never could have imagined.
It's about trusting the journey, even when it's messy. Who knows? Maybe those challenges that we're facing right now, they're the very things that are shaping us into the people we're meant to be.
Food for thought. And that's the beauty of these ancient stories, isn't it? They give us this timeless wisdom, these insights that can guide us through our own journeys, no matter how challenging they may be.
It's like they're speaking to us across the centuries.
I love that. Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into the early life of Moses. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you'll keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep discovering that hidden wisdom within these ancient tales. We'll see you next time.